Hello, everyone. This is the story of Judith Eva Barcy, a child star who hadn't even turned 9 at the time. Before starring in Jaws, The Revenge, Judith had already appeared in numerous animated films, television series, and commercials. With her golden hair, big sparkling eyes, chubby cheeks, and innocent smile, she captured the hearts of audiences everywhere. The film Jaws. The Revenge was one of her most successful works, marking a promising step in her career. However, less than 2 years after its release, a shocking tragedy occurred. Judith, only 10 years old, was found dead in her own home. Her mother, Maria, had also been murdered. Could this be part of the tragic curse of Hollywood child stars? Many young stars, like Lindsay Lohan, Macaulay Culkin, and Judy Garland, the actress who played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, faced struggles growing up. But none of them met a fate as horrifying and heartbreaking as Judith's. What really happened? Today, we will uncover the story behind the screen of this child actress. A glimmer of hope for a Hollywood dream. In 1956, the Hungarian Revolution broke out. Amidst the chaos and economic collapse, many Hungarians fled the country. Among them were Judith's father, Joseph Barcy, and her mother, Maria. They left everything behind, immigrating to the United States in search of a better life. Joseph Barcy was born in 1932 and endured a tragic childhood. When he was just 2 years old, both of his parents abandoned him, leaving him to a life of homelessness and instability. This deep-rooted fear of abandonment shaped him into a hardened, anxious, and controlling man. When the uprising in Hungary began, Joseph escaped to Austria, then to France, and finally, after years of wandering, arrived in the U.S. during his journey. He married his first wife, but the marriage was short-lived due to his violent nature. Maria, too, had a painful past. She was born into a household with an alcoholic father and suffered both physical and emotional abuse as a child. When the revolution erupted, she fled Hungary, traveling through Germany before reaching the U.S., carrying her wounds, but also an unshaken desire to change her fate. In Los Angeles, Maria worked as a waitress in a restaurant where she met Joseph, a man who often visited the bar. Unlike other customers, Joseph would casually pay with crisp $100 bills, giving off the impression of wealth. In reality, he was just a plumber with a stable income. But to Maria, a woman who had endured so much hardship, Joseph seemed like a safe and reliable choice, and so, despite having many suitors, she chose him. They married in 1977. A year later, in June 1978, Judith Barcy was born. Maria was passionate about cinema. During her turbulent youth, Hollywood films provided her with comfort. The dazzling movies and glamorous stars on the big screen mesmerized her. To Maria, Hollywood symbolized dreams and success, the only escape from poverty and instability. She had always dreamed of Hollywood, but now, after having Judith, she transferred all her aspirations onto her daughter. Maria and Joseph adored Judith, but they also placed heavy expectations on her. From the time Judith was just 2 years old, Maria dedicated herself entirely to molding her into a Hollywood child star. She believed that Judith's stardom would bring to life the dream she had never been able to reach. To Maria, Judith was not just a daughter, she was her only hope of touching the silver screen dream. Maria's persistence eventually paid off. When Judith turned 5, a casting agent spotted her and was immediately drawn to her charm and confidence. The agent believed Judith was perfect for commercials and children's roles. In fact, when they saw her ice skating, they thought she was 3 years old instead of 5 because of her petite frame. Thanks to the agent's recommendation, Judith landed her first commercial. Her screen debut was in a Donald Duck Orange juice advertisement. With her natural acting skills, engaging personality, and camera awareness, she quickly became a sought-after face. Big brands lined up to feature her in their commercials, paving the way for Judith's bright future in show business. By 1984, at just 6 years old, Judith landed her first significant role in the TV film Fatal Vision, portraying Kimberly McDonald. The film was based on a real-life murder case that shocked America, where a man named Jeffrey McDonald was convicted of murdering his wife and 2 daughters, including Kimberly, the role Judith played. Chillingly, the movie's storyline bore an eerie resemblance to the tragic fate that awaited Judith, as if foreshadowing the horror to come. Judith's career skyrocketed. By the time she was 8, she was earning over $100,000 a year, equivalent to roughly $200,000 today. But fame came at a heavy cost. Her grueling work schedule deprived her of a normal childhood. She had almost no friends her age, and her education was constantly interrupted for film shoots. To the world, she was a talented and successful child star, but behind the glamour, she was being pulled into an inescapable nightmare. A home filled with pain. Judith's father, Joseph, revealed his true violent nature soon after marrying Maria. He frequently yelled and physically abused his wife, even in front of others. His friends all knew about his violent temper. When Judith was born, his anger and beatings extended to his daughter as well. The close bond between Maria and Judith seemed to irritate him even more. He believed that Maria was spoiling Judith too much, using that as an excuse to impose cruel punishments on her, both physical and emotional. Their neighbors once recounted a heartbreaking incident. One day, Maria gave Judith a red kite as a gift. The little girl was overjoyed, but before she even had a chance to fly it, Joseph snatched it from her hands. Judith burst into tears, begging him to return it. But Joseph turned to Maria coldly and said, "See, she doesn't know how to share. I told you, you're spoiling her." Then, without hesitation, he tore the kite apart right in front of Judith and walked away, leaving her sobbing uncontrollably. Joseph was an alcoholic and had stopped working regularly. When he was drunk, he frequently beat his wife and daughter, smashed household items, and made their lives unbearable. Maria and Judith became terrified of returning home. But Joseph's violence wasn't just physical. He was also obsessively controlling. He dictated every aspect of Maria and Judith's lives, forbidding them from having any male acquaintances. On multiple occasions, he threatened Maria, "If you ever try to leave me, I'll slit your throat." Even though Judith became famous and earned a substantial income, allowing the family to move from a cramped apartment to a spacious house, Joseph did not feel grateful. Instead, he grew increasingly resentful and anxious, fearing that his control over his wife and daughter was slipping away. He was both jealous of Judith for being the family's primary breadwinner and unable to give up the comfortable lifestyle her earnings provided. This only made him tighten his grip, forbidding unnecessary outings, intercepting Maria's mail, and repeatedly threatening to kill them both. A neighbor later told the Los Angeles Times that Joseph had said hundreds of times that he would kill his wife. The neighbor once tried reasoning with him, asking, "If you kill your wife, what will happen to your daughter?" But Joseph coldly replied, "I'll kill her too." Under the unbearable pressure at home, Maria sought help from people in the film industry. She often confided in crew members, admitting that she and Judith were terrified of going home. Some advised her to leave Joseph as soon as possible, but her fear of him was too overwhelming to act. In 1986, after one particularly violent threat from Joseph, Maria finally called 911. But when the police arrived, they found no concrete evidence of abuse and had no legal grounds to arrest him. Feeling helpless and scared, Maria chose not to press charges. That same year, 8-year-old Judith landed a major role in Jaws, The Revenge, a film that was set to be shot in the Bahamas. Before Maria and Judith left for the trip, Joseph gave them a chilling send-off. Holding a knife to his daughter's throat, he growled, "If you don't come back to me, I'll slit your throat." Imagine the horror of a child being threatened with death by her own father. The psychological damage this must have caused is unimaginable. Yet, this was Judith's reality, a sweet, innocent girl, always eager to please her parents, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. If she stayed, she would continue suffering under Joseph's abuse. If she ran, he would surely kill her. Like many abused children, Judith naively believed that the problem was her fault. Maybe she wasn't obedient enough. Maybe she wasn't working hard enough. Maybe if she tried a little more, her father would finally be kind to her and her mother. But we all know that was just a child's desperate illusion. By 1988, everything reached a breaking point. Not even 10 years old, Judith's cheerful, happy-go-lucky persona began to crack. She displayed strange, troubling behaviors. The most noticeable was that she started pulling out her eyelashes, something known as trichotillomania, a compulsive disorder often linked to anxiety, depression, or trauma. People suffering from this condition feel an uncontrollable urge to pull out their hair as a way to cope with stress. After plucking out all her eyelashes, Judith even began pulling the whiskers from her pet cat. During this time, she confided in friends, saying, "I'm scared to go home. My dad is getting worse. He drinks every day. I know he wants to kill my mom." In May of that year, Judith auditioned for All Dogs Go to Heaven. But in the middle of singing, she suddenly broke down in tears, unable to continue. Maybe the lyrics had struck a deep, painful chord inside her, triggering emotions she had buried for so long. She simply couldn't hold it in anymore. Judith's agent, Ruth Hansen, finally realized the severity of the situation. She urged Maria to take Judith to a child psychologist. After just one session, the psychologist immediately contacted Ruth, warning, "This child has severe emotional and psychological distress. I have no choice but to report this to Child Protective Services." For the first time, someone officially recognized the suffering Judith was enduring. Child Protective Services opened an investigation, but the bureaucratic process moved too slowly. Realizing that danger was imminent, Maria decided to act on her own. She began secretly planning to leave Joseph, despite knowing the risks of his retaliation. She quietly rented an apartment near the film studio and started moving their belongings little by little. Whenever Judith wasn't filming, they would stay at the new apartment, only returning to the house at night. Maria's plan was to finalize everything before officially divorcing Joseph. To make herself less appealing to him, she even stopped cleaning the house, letting it fall into complete disarray. The plan seemed to be working, at least for a while. Joseph started seeing a much younger woman. When Maria and Judith moved into their new apartment, Child Protective Services determined that Judith was no longer in immediate danger. At Maria's request, they closed the case in less than a month, without conducting any further investigation. It was the second time after the 1986 police report that the authorities briefly stepped in, only to walk away, abandoning the mother and daughter once again. Time passed. On July 25, 1988, shortly after Judith's 10th birthday, a neighbor saw her riding her bike around the neighborhood. No one knew it would be the last time they ever saw her alive. That afternoon, Judith missed an important appointment. When someone called the house to check on her, Joseph answered and claimed that Maria and Judith had driven to San Diego. The next day, her agent, Ruth Hansen, called again. This time, Joseph's response sent chills down her spine. In a strange, detached voice, he said, "I'm about to leave forever, but before I go, I just wanted to say goodbye to my little girl." Around 8:30 a.m., a neighbor watering their lawn heard a loud gunshot. Moments later, smoke and flames erupted from the Barcy home. Panicked, the neighbor called the police, but by the time firefighters arrived, the fire was already out of control. When the flames were finally extinguished, rescue workers found 3 charred bodies inside the house: Judith, Maria, and Joseph. Based on the evidence, investigators reconstructed the horrific events. Judith had been shot in the head while lying on her side in bed. The bullet entered through the back of her skull. Maria had been shot in the hallway, likely as she tried to run when she heard the first gunshot. No one knew the exact time they were killed, but it was likely on the night of July 25th. After murdering his wife and daughter, Joseph remained in the house with their bodies for a full day. He even picked up the phone when Ruth Hansen called, speaking as if nothing had happened, a chilling display of cold-blooded detachment. On the morning of July 27th, knowing there was no way out, Joseph doused the house in gasoline and set it on fire. Then he went into the garage and shot himself. After years of threats, Joseph finally did what he had always promised. He murdered his wife and child. Judith was only 10 years old, standing just 112 centimeters tall when she died. A photograph from the crime scene left everyone who saw it heartbroken. In it, a police officer was carrying Judith's small, lifeless body out of the rubble. She looked so tiny, so light, as if she were nothing more than a wisp of smoke drifting away. Her life was as fleeting as a shooting star, leaving behind only a brief flicker of light before vanishing into the darkness. Though Judith Barcy's career was short-lived, her performances and her story left a lasting impact on audiences. But her tragic death also served as a harsh wake-up call for Hollywood and society as a whole. Movie studios, law enforcement, child protection agencies, friends, and family, so many people had seen the warning signs. But no one acted decisively enough to save her. If just one person had intervened sooner, if someone had cared just a little more, this tragedy might never have happened. But life doesn't work with ifs. Judith's story gained attention because she was a child star, but in the shadows, how many other children endure suffering no one should ever have to face? Her story is a brutal reminder that behind closed doors, unimaginable horrors can take place, and that domestic violence can have devastating consequences. Whether a rising star or an ordinary child, every child in this world deserves to grow up in love, free from fear, tragedy, and pain. What do you think about this case?
Between 2003 and 2007, a monster disguised as a human prowled the taxi industry, preying on and brutally murdering dozens of innocent young women in a peaceful rural area of China. The horrifying truth began to surface when the first bodies were discovered. The emergence of fear. By 2003, living standards in China had significantly improved. However, private car ownership was still uncommon, making taxis a popular mode of transportation in cities nationwide. Yet, there was an exception: the taxi industry in Zanhuang County, Shijiazhuang City, where September 12, 2003. Although, since then, women in Zanhuang County were gripped by fear. They avoided going out alone, relied on their parents for school commutes, and rarely dared to take taxis. This fear crippled not just the local taxi industry but cast a shadow of terror over the entire town. The heartbreaking reality was that these missing girls had been abducted, raped, and murdered. The perpetrator? A taxi driver. A man the locals would later call a cold-blooded monster. Not only was he ruthless, but he also possessed an uncanny ability to evade surveillance, making it incredibly difficult for the police to capture him. Even under suspicion, he continued his crimes boldly, right under the investigators' noses. So, who was this taxi driver? What turned him into such a heartless killer? And why did it take the police over 3 years to finally catch him? The predator of innocent girls. Zhang Leilei. Zhang Leilei was born in 1980 in Hualin Village, Zanhuang County, Shijiazhuang City, Hebei Province, China. As a child, Zhang was a poor student. After graduating from high school, he didn't pursue further education. Unlike most young men his age who sought jobs elsewhere, Zhang was introverted, quiet, and preferred staying at home, helping his parents with farm work. When Zhang turned 20, his parents grew concerned about his future. Hoping to set him on a stable career path and eventually help him settle down, they enrolled him in a driving school. Surprisingly, despite his introverted nature and poor academic record, Zhang learned to drive quickly and passed the tests on his first attempt. After obtaining his driver's license, his family pooled their savings to buy him a car, allowing him to work as a taxi driver. At that time, Zanhuang's taxi industry was thriving. Thanks to this, Zhang's family's finances improved significantly within just a few years. Seeing their son in stable employment, his parents arranged a marriage for him with a girl from a neighboring village. Their married life seemed peaceful. His wife stayed home to care for the family, while Zhang drove his taxi daily, returning home in the evenings. Zhang became a trusted driver, well acquainted with every street and alley in the county. His income was stable, providing comfortably for his family. By all accounts, Zhang Leilei should have been content. However, frequent interactions with various passengers, especially young women, sparked dark, twisted desires within him. He developed a dangerous obsession with young, fashionable women. These growing urges eventually pushed him down a dark path. The first victim. On the afternoon of September 12, 2003, Ding Maoling, a 20-year-old woman, approached Zhang Leilei's taxi, intending to hire him for a ride. It was an ordinary day in Bailu Village, Longmengxi Township, Zanhuang County. But when Zhang laid eyes on the young, attractive and stylish woman, the monster within him awakened. Exploiting Ding's trust, Zhang deliberately drove in the opposite direction of her destination. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. Zhang had taken her to a remote, desolate area, far from help and prying eyes. There, Zhang sexually assaulted Ding Maoling. After committing the heinous act, he brutally murdered her, then disposed of her body in a large pit. The pit was originally an ancient tomb from the southern and northern dynasties, but after being looted, it had become an open cavity. Although it was located in farmland, where the body could have been easily discovered, fate intervened. A nearby landfill operator accidentally dumped trash into the pit, completely covering Ding Maoling's remains. After the murder, Zhang returned home, gripped by fear. He was terrified that the police would soon find out. However, as days passed without any developments, his anxiety faded. Believing his method was foolproof, he grew bolder. This false sense of security led him to commit his next crime, the second murder. On October 1st, 2003, during the National Day holiday, a time when many students traveled home, Yang Mao, a young woman from Zhujianzi village, Shooting Township, Zanhuang County, was among the travelers. At the Zanhuang bus station, she spotted Zheng's taxi. His simple, innocent appearance, complete with cloth shoes, aroused no suspicion. She got into his car, unaware she had just stepped into the clutches of a cold-blooded killer. Using the same tactics as before, Zhang drove Yang Mao to an isolated location. There, he sexually assaulted and viciously murdered her, later dumping her body into an old well. When Yang Mao went missing, her family initially believed she had been abducted by human traffickers and taken to remote, impoverished mountain regions. Desperate to find her, they searched tirelessly across Zanhuang County, Shijiazhuang City, and even ventured into remote areas of Shaanxi and Shaanxi provinces. Despite their exhaustive efforts, no clues surfaced. Yang Mao had vanished without a trace. The disappearance of two young women within such a short period alarmed the Zanhuang County Police. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, they ramped up manpower and launched an extensive investigation throughout the town. Dozens of officers scoured every street and alley daily, hoping to uncover any leads connected to the missing girls. However, their efforts yielded nothing. No missing persons, no bodies, no concrete evidence. The investigation hit a dead end, leaving the police without a clear direction. Observing the growing scale of the investigation, Zhang Lele realized he was under suspicion. To avoid detection, he decided to temporarily freeze his activities. During this period, he refrained from committing further crimes and even switched vehicles, replacing his familiar old taxi with a new van to alter his identity and evade police surveillance. This strategy proved effective. For over 6 months, the police found no evidence linking him to the crimes. The earlier disappearances faded into the background due to the lack of new information. Once again, the cold-blooded killer slipped through the cracks of the legal system. The killing resumes. A trail of terror continues. Despite his temporary pause, Zheng's predatory instincts remained sharp. He sensed that police scrutiny was gradually easing. Emboldened by this realization, he resumed his heinous activities, once again shattering the peace of his hometown. On May 2, 2004, during a public holiday, Li Mao, a 17-year-old girl working in Pingshan County, was preparing to return home for the summer break. Her family lived in Shiduan Village, Longmengxi Township, Zanhuang County. Like many others, she went to the Zanhuang bus station and boarded a van, a common local transportation service that charged just 1 yuan per trip. Unfortunately, the driver that day was none other than Zhang Lele, and Li Mao was his only passenger. During the journey, Zhang diverted the van to an isolated location where he sexually assaulted and brutally murdered the young girl. To dispose of her body, he dumped it into an old well in Yuanshe County. Less than 4 months later, on August 21, 2004, another victim fell into Zheng's trap. Wang Maoxian, a young woman from Nama Village, Nangxingguang Township, Zanhuang County, boarded what she thought was an ordinary 1 yuan van ride home. Tragically, she had chosen Zhang's van. Seizing the opportunity, Zhang repeated his brutal pattern of rape and murder. This time, however, he couldn't find a suitable place to hide the body. In a careless move, he dumped her remains in a cornfield in Baixia village, Xintai County. This recklessness marked a turning point in Zhang's crime spree. A break in the case. Just 4 days later, on August 25, 2004, the Baixia County Police received a report from a local farmer who had discovered Wang Maoxian's decomposing body in his family's cornfield. After conducting an investigation, police confirmed that the remains belonged to the young woman who had recently been reported missing in Zanhuang County, Shijiazhuang. The discovery of Wang's body shifted the focus of the earlier missing persons cases. They were now officially murder investigations. This revelation captured the attention of law enforcement agencies at all levels. Compiling all available evidence, investigators noticed a crucial pattern. All the victims had disappeared after boarding one-yuan vans, commonly referred to as black taxis, unregistered vehicles operating illegally. This lead significantly narrowed the scope of the investigation. Authorities began tracking all one-yuan transportation services and unauthorized drivers operating in the region. However, despite the police's renewed efforts, the investigation stagnated once again. No suspects were identified, and the killer remained elusive. During this time, fear and paranoia spread throughout Zanhuang County and neighboring areas. Parents forbade their daughters from going out alone, especially avoiding the notorious one-yuan vans. Daily life was disrupted, and the community lived under a cloud of constant anxiety. Yet, even this widespread fear wasn't enough to deter Zhang Lei. Immediately after Wang's body was found, Zhang made another calculated move. He switched from his van to a private car, believing that changing vehicles would help him blend in and target new victims without drawing police attention. This tactic worked. He successfully concealed his identity and stayed one step ahead of the investigation. On December 24, 2004, the weather in Zanhuang County was freezing, with thick snow blanketing the roads. On that day, a young woman named Lin Maofan was preparing to return home. Normally, she would ride her bicycle, but the snow was too deep, and the roads were slippery. Hoping her family could pick her up, Lin called home, but her family had an emergency and couldn't come. Concerned about the recent disappearances in the area, Lin's mother advised her to ask a relative to pick her up. Unfortunately, her trusted uncle was not in town. With no other options, Lin decided to take a taxi. To avoid potential danger, she chose not to board a cheap taxi, but instead opted for a more expensive one, believing it would be safer. Tragically, that choice sealed her fate. The taxi she boarded was driven by none other than Zhang Lei. His eyes gleamed with sinister intent the moment Lin got into his car. She was exactly the type of victim he sought. During the journey, he assaulted and murdered her in cold blood. This time, Zhang had learned from his past mistakes. Instead of hastily disposing of the body, he carefully planned the cover-up. He placed Lin's body in a woven sack, added large stones to weigh it down, and tightly secured it. He then dumped the sack into a water well outside Duhu village, Zanhuang County. On March 7, 2005, 2 local villagers discovered the suspicious sack while watering their fields. When they opened it, they were horrified to find Lin Maofan's decomposing body. Unfortunately, due to the extended time since her death, the remains were severely decomposed, providing little forensic evidence. Between September 2004 and that discovery, several other female bodies were found in Zanhuang County and surrounding areas. All victims shared the same tragic fate. They had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. The police now classified the case as a serial murder investigation, but the lack of witnesses and the advanced state of decomposition of the bodies severely hampered progress. Due to the brutality of the crimes, the case caught the attention of the Provincial Police Bureau. On August 22, 2006, a specialized task force of national criminal experts was dispatched to Zanhuang to oversee the investigation. Despite their expertise, the initial efforts of the task force yielded no major breakthroughs because of the lack of concrete evidence. However, they soon identified a critical pattern. All victims disappeared after boarding taxis or similar transport vehicles. the investigators noticed several commonalities. All victims were young women aged 17 to 20. The disappearances occurred near bus stations, hospitals, or taxi stands. All cases happened during the daytime, with the victims traveling home to rural areas. Each victim was sexually assaulted before being killed. These patterns suggested that the perpetrator was exploiting public transportation, possibly even posing as a taxi driver, to target his victims. Realizing this connection, the task force launched a large-scale inspection campaign, targeting all taxis, vans, and cheap tricycles operating in San Juan County. Over 5,000 vehicles were checked, but no clear leads emerged. During this sweep, the police even inspected Zhang Leilei's vehicle. However, lacking concrete evidence or any suspicious signs, they failed to identify him as the cold-blooded killer they had been hunting for years. Zhang's next move: a change in strategy. The vehicle inspections rattled Zhang. But instead of stopping, he adapted. He realized that his murders had drawn too much attention, both from the police and the public. To avoid capture, he decided to change his modus operandi. He would now only assault his victims without killing them. At first, this tactic worked. The victims he assaulted chose to remain silent, driven by feelings of shame or fear. This silence prevented the police from expanding their investigation. However, on March 30th, 2007, everything changed. One of Zhang's latest victims, who managed to escape with her life, bravely reported the assault to the authorities. Her testimony provided crucial information, allowing the task force to identify and arrest Zhang Leilei, the monster unmasked. Under interrogation, Zhang Leilei confessed to raping over 10 young women and brutally murdering 6 of them. His horrifying crimes shocked not only the investigators but the entire nation. On August 24, 2007, Zhang was sentenced to death. The cold-blooded monster finally faced the justice he deserved.